There's a weird guy standing at the door, Dad.
That meme of like when dogs are barking and then you yell at them, "Shut up!" And then like the dog's like, "I'm just trying to help you. I'm trying to save your life."
Dude, that never works. I have people who I'll hear their dogs barking and they're just like, "Hey, hey!" Like, you're making it worse, dude.
Yeah, we're barking back. It's barking. You're barking back.
Stop yelling. You stop yelling, dude.
Right? Yeah. You taught me this.
Hey everybody, welcome back to a podcast for creative people. I'm Christopher Talon, author of Switchers and the soon-to-be-released Sleepwalker Angel, which you can pre-order at ChristopherTalon.com. But that's not important. Today I talked to Marcel Fable Price for the third time on the podcast, and he has a new book of poetry coming out soon on October 8th called New American Monarch. I've had a sample of it. It's great. You'll get to hear a reading of one of the poems at the end of the podcast, or near the end of the podcast. And I hope you enjoy the conversation. Here's Marcel Fable Price.
Marcel Fable Price.
Marcel Fable Price, thanks for coming back to the show for the third time.
Dang, is it the third?
Yeah, dude.
Thank you so much for having me back.
You got a new book coming out. What was the name of the book again?
New American Monarch.
New American Monarch. That's dope. Is that you on the cover too? Is that you?
Yeah. So actually, I got to work with an incredibly dope creative who helped bring the cover to light. Esan Somercell, him as well as Steve Weatherby, Crossworm, helped bring this cover to life.
Yeah, and for people that are like,
We can't tell, what is the cover?
it's just like barely the bottom of your chin and your chest, and you're wearing a really nice looking suit, which is to be expected of my man over here.
I appreciate that. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Podcast, Yeah, the cover is a suit, a chain, a pendant that looks like an iced out monarch butterfly in a really vibrant suit, which was also made by an incredible black suit maker, Archie Swade.
Let's just start with the title, man. Where are you coming from mentally with the title New American Monarch?
So I guess the whole idea behind the title New American Monarch is the book is really broken down into three different chapters. It's broken down into pupa, chrysalis, and transformation. And the poems from each segment are to capture different points in life where I was at, where I thought that I was at in that process. But also, monarch butterflies are our butterfly here in Michigan. They're something that I've always looked to when I thought of, growth in the human experience. So New American Monarch, it sounds like it's like, oh, this prestigious, royal, and that's like what the cover's supposed to feel. But it's also just like being at this new point of life and growth.
You've had some big changes in life, both personally and professionally, just over the last couple of years, man. First of all, I'm sorry for all the things that you have gone through. Lost your wife, had some stuff going on where you ended up parting ways professionally with the group you used to be with, and now you're in a different city, man. So that's a lot of stuff. Were these poems that you've had for a while, or is a lot of this stuff that you've written in the midst of all these things happening?
It's a little bit of a mixture of both. So I actually started writing the book about 6 years ago, and 6 years ago, that was before my wife ever got diagnosed with cancer.
Yeah.
That was before we knew that we were even going on a journey with cancer in the first place. It was before the diatribe grew to the organization where it had, full-time positions. It was still very much, a group of artists who were doing everything that they could administrative-wise to do something that none of us really know how to do. We weren't, nonprofit professionals. We weren't people who went to school for this or who were trained to do this work. And we were building this giant plane while we were flying it. And when I got the first rendition of the book done, shortly after is when Nika got diagnosed with cancer. She got diagnosed with stage 3B metastatic breast cancer. So it was very advanced, but it wasn't terminal.
I would say the higher the number, the deeper the stage, right? Like the deeper you are into it.
Correct. So it was pretty close to stage 4, but not stage 4. It was at this point a tumor the size of a softball in her breast, as well as cancer throughout her lymph nodes under her left arm. And at this point, I decided to really stop doing art. I wanted to be as present as she deserved that I should be. And at that time, I dove into art in the diatribe full time because we had this organization that existed during COVID in a time where an organization wasn't supposed to exist. And we weren't at a spot where we qualified for any PPP loans because we had a bunch of, independent contractors. And I had somebody who used to be a friend at the time who just got a house, and somebody who is a friend who just had a baby. And I was like, man, I need to grow and scale this if we are all going to be able to survive on this. And also if I'm going to be able to go on this journey of going alongside my partner as she gets diagnosed with cancer. It was, I'd say 2 years after that when we thought, we beat cancer. And when cancer returned, and it metastasized and turned into terminal cancer. She was given 12 to 18 months to live. And
so young too. I mean, you guys are both in your 30s, right?
Yeah. So she ended up passing away at age 30.
At 30.
Yeah.
Sorry, man. That sucks.
And yeah, no, it was really horrible. And I would say that it was at that stage that I really became the worst version of myself. There's something about knowing that death is coming, and also watching somebody die slowly and feeling helpless. And I think what I tried to do at the time was throw my all into my work. It was like, oh, this is the thing that I can control. This is the thing that I can, put my energy and time into. So, I started a very ambitious capital campaign, which for those that don't know what that means, it's raising money to create a building. We raised money to create the Emory Arts and Culture Center. It was a $6.5 million lift on Division, which is a predominantly, Latine and Black part of Grand Rapids and one of the most underinvested in parts of the city. And in a matter of a year, with only 3 full-time staff, none of them development staff, I did in fact raise $6.5 million.
I remember being at the county commissioners meeting there when they so unkindly decided to just sit on the money rather than give it out to anybody else.
Yeah,
which was what you came on the podcast last time to talk about.
Yep, and that was like a very intentional withholding of funds. It was very much targeted for us not to receive it. And I think it was at that point that I really started to realize the politics that exist in Grand Rapids and how money moves.
Because one LLC that did get money was inactive for 3 years and just happened to be owned by a college friend of one of the commissioners.
Yeah, for sure. And as somebody, who lives in a fairly luxurious part of town that bought a building in the area. And it's just, anyways, I feel like I'm trying to get away from the point in life of where I'm going down this rabbit hole of frustration. But I had about 4 years where, performing wasn't really an option. Touring definitely wasn't an option because I had to be a caregiver. And at the end of Nika's life, I was significantly more of a caregiver than I was a husband. I became, like I said, the worst version of myself as a husband. And I just became really mentally unwell. I was in and out of Pine Rest, going off a lot of different medications, Xanax, Klonopin for panic attacks. My bipolar was not in a comfortable, maintainable, active space. And while I was really high functioning at work, I just isolated myself from people and went back to writing. And I finished this book and refined this book. So now I was really, really excited when Intermonset and the folks at Diagram New Michigan Press were excited to pick it up. And a buddy of mine, Steve Weatherby, he was like, hey man, like, I've been waiting for you to talk about, what happened and what's going on in your life. And like, he's like, you got me writing. And there's a lot of people that you got creating. Like, when are you going to get back to that? And I really needed that nudge. And that's what really got me to start shopping it around and to get excited to get back out to performing again. sense. I've had some really amazing gigs. I'm excited to get back to performing and do it on the terms of, not gigging to survive. Because last time I was doing art, I was gigging to survive. I was having to take every single show I could take, and still grinding myself in the dust. And I don't want my art this time to be something that, makes me feel like I'm grinding myself into nothing.
I kind of want to talk about writing as healing, because for me, if I go more than 2-3 days without sitting down and at least revisiting something that I'd already written or writing something fresh, I start to get kind of weird. I start to get annoyed more quickly, just kind of start to float into a negative headspace. It's a thing. And I usually journal before I start writing. And it's a lot of times in that journaling where I'm like, oh shit, I didn't even know I felt that way about this until you sit down and, put the phone away, stop watching TV, stop answering emails, and really just go, how do I feel right now?
Yeah. That's huge. That's critical. I feel like, especially for creative folks, creating that process, that routine is crucial.
Yeah.
Like people say to write every day, but whether it's, a social media post or whether it's journaling or whether it's like sitting down and trying to craft a poem or chisel away at a chapter, getting in the habit of writing is very much necessary. I feel like just staying in the habit of creating is something that I've been fortunate to do since, leaving my tenure at the Diatribe. And that's something that does feel good. It feels liberating. Like between that and between therapy, and between being on medication that feels like it works.
Yeah.
Like I feel probably more clear than I've felt in a long time.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to hear that too, man. Everybody deserves peace, especially when you've been handed several things in a row that are just kind of like, fuck, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know how else to put it into words besides that,
Yeah, no, I think that's something that I've been really fortunate. I think that while everything is horrible, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone, I feel fortunate to have gone through everything that I've gone through. It's not pleasant and it's not enjoyable. But even as of late, getting out to different, shows and gigging, like there's people that came after me after the show that I did in Three Rivers, and they're like, hey, I got to a point where I felt like I lost everything and I wanted to quit. And I didn't know that other people felt like that.
Yeah.
And it's wild because sometimes, as humans, we can convince ourselves that our situations are so unique,
right.
but so many people can relate to our experiences, humaning and going through their experience. And I think that there was a lot of times where I really convinced myself that nobody would understand, or I'm going through this, or I'm going through this alone, or I have to go through this. But the more I, again, started to write about it, the more I started to talk about it, the more I started to put it out in the world, the less I started to crucify myself and feel like I just had to sit in the darkness.
This is as good a place as I need to jump into the content of the book, because the sample pages that you sent me, crucifixion was kind of a theme throughout some of the different poems. Maybe not the full theme of the poem itself, but talking about let's not look at a cross-shaped crowd and think of a crucifixion, or I felt like I was crucified by so-and-so. Is that something that has always been kind of, I guess, a part of who you are? Do you have a strong religious or spiritual background?
Yeah, no, actually. I really am not somebody who identifies as a religious person, but there is a lot of ties into spirituality and belief in this book. Because I feel like in this journey, as you're diving into nothing and devouring yourself, you really have your faith tested. You have what you believe in tested.
Because anybody can believe what they want to believe when life is good, but when things are being taken from you, when you're watching somebody that you love, like you said, deteriorate, it probably makes you question just about everything.
Oh, it makes you question everything. like if there is a greader power, why this? Why would
Yeah.
somebody go through this? Why would somebody who is so good be taken away? Like, why not me? Why not somebody else? Like, I can think of a million more people who and it's like, dang, nobody deserves to die. But it's like, man, I'd trade a whole lot of people for Nika. And I think that, it does, really test your mettle with what you believe. But I think to the point about the book, after Nika died, there was a church, by my house that I went to, called Lighthouse. And again, it was a church that was always by, the house that we bought, that was the house that we wanted to beat cancer in. And I remember one day in particular, this Pastor RJ, he was telling this story about, the city, and, the walls were crumbling down as they were about to be attacked. And, this person was running around saying, hey, we need to build up these walls. We need to build up these walls. Like, or we're going to get destroyed. Like, that's it. Like, these powers that be are coming. Like, please help me. And people were like, man, you're crazy. Like, number one, we're not going to be attacked. And number two, like, how does a few people build up these walls? Like, it's for nothing. Like, why are you doing the work for nothing? And next thing you know, this person's running around like, please, we got to build these walls. We got to build these walls. We got to build these walls. And it really made me realize, how so many stories, in the Bible just feel like, stories that I've seen people go through, stories that I can relate to my own life, or hardships, extreme hardships that I've seen people face. And maybe they might not be as, grandiose in like traditional fables, in the sense of like something that feels so out of the human experience, but they do feel relatable. So this book, it's really a juxtaposition between like faith in like hip hop. Every chapter that's broken down, it has what feels like a Bible verse, but it's really like in the theme or design of like a rap song that like stuck out at that point in time in my life. But it's also meant to like have this like look at contemporary art, and how artists look at the world. So it's really like this line that tends to be so prevalent in culture in so many different ways, but allowing people to find, their faith and what they believe in as they go through this, and hopefully see themselves in the book, and be able to attach it to different parts of their life.
Mm-hmm. I definitely can relate to some of the stuff in the book. Maybe not being a black man, but like just the pain that comes out through that. Because like you said, your pain is specific to your situation, but what you're feeling isn't like, it's not brand new to the world.
Yeah. But also as a man, and I mean as a white man, I think I'm by a drastic margin, white men have the highest rates of suicide out of any demographic, that exists. And in the last year, actually, I've known a couple different people that were lost to suicide. And it's also wild because most men that die to suicide, number one, leave notes that are to-do lists, which is, a wild thought. It's like people feel like they have so much going on that after they die, they have to like pass off the what's going on so that other people don't like forget to do the things, which is like a wild thought in itself. But also, I feel like so much of suicidality when it comes to men comes from like this feeling of like you have to hold everything, whether it's like you have to hold everything financially, or you have to hold everything emotionally, or you just have to, you keep having to suck it up. You have to keep bottling. You have to keep bottling. You have to keep bottling. And people say, oh yeah, but the importance is, you got to talk about it, or oh yeah, you just got to, get a therapist. But then also it's like, yeah, but anytime that I try to talk, I'm also like not allowed to talk. And like, where are the spaces? But also men don't create these spaces, right? So it's also like a space where it's like diving into radical vulnerability, and hopefully the other men read that and feel like they can do the same, and talking about some really heavy personal things.
To cross promote another episode that I did with Scoob, the artist. He still has the Trauma Project stuff going on, and I produced two of the tracks that Mike Logan did, the not really spoken word comedy, but they were both for they were both fake drug ads for a drug called Real Blackenol, and the whole thing was like, it's not a pill, it's not a shot, It's just talking to somebody about your problems.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's something true. That, I mean, I can't speak to the Black community, but just as men in general, you don't want to put your burden on somebody else. You don't want to look weak. You know, that whole like I'm tough. I can handle shit. I can handle my shit and your shit. Don't, and I'm not gonna burden anyone with it. That's just something in general. I think men need to let go.
I agree.
And I see it a lot on Instagram Reels too. So I don't know if I'm getting targeted by their algorithm, but I see a lot of stuff that's like, you're not alone. You don't have to feel like you're holding it all together for everybody all the time, like those kinds of things.
Yeah, I feel like as soon as you interact with those things on Instagram, then it gets you in the chokehold.
Yeah.
And next thing you know, that's all you see.
Yeah. Oh, you like that one time? All right, you must have problems. We're going to show you nothing.
Everything. Because this is a podcast for creatives, is to the point that we talked in the beginning. It's really just getting yourself to create every day. So like some days it would be, the doodling of the pages. Some days it would be like the letters of like, what are the breadcrumbs that I want to leave, Some days it would be, the audio recording, or some days it would be, working with the artist to create the cover design or the chapter breaks. It was literally just always just getting in a process of constantly creating.
Yeah.
And I think that up until one thing that I learned throughout this process, and as I'm learning, diving into a book of nonfiction, is the two worlds are treated very separately and differently in the world of creative writing. Like when it comes to poetry, you can solicit different presses and publishers. You can, send them query letters and send them samples of your work, and really let them know like how you'd like to see it bloom. When it comes to full-length works and works of nonfiction, it's a lot more intense and in depth of a process, from like the draft that you send them, to the processes of even querying agents and or publishers. Also, a part of this is like learning the process, which like also is something that I get really passionate about. As a creative, sometimes you can love to create, and like that's why you may only ever stay a hobbyist. But like if you as a modern day creative, you have to learn how to be a manager and a creative and a marketing person and a booking person. So I would say like you have to also fall in love with the process of like learning everything you can. So like some of the time is also spent learning, how do I query publishers? Like what are the things that make a cover what it is? What are the things that have or haven't been done? Why haven't they been done? Which is like a huge thing when it came to the audio portion of the book. How do you even upload an audio book to Audible? Like all of that, are things that you have to learn and dive into. So I would say that.
Sorry for jumping in and cutting you off.
Yeah, no, please.
But even as somebody who writes fiction, writes novels, I've talked to people who, I heard one guy who said every title he has sold at least 1 million copies, and he's got, I don't know, probably like 20 books at this point. And he's said, my publisher still wants me to do my own social media. They still want me to book my own speaking events. They still want me to make my own travel arrangements. They want me to do all the promoting, and it's like, wow. So even at that point in today's age, like there is no magic, like sign the contract and all of a sudden everything is taken care of for you. You really have to be the do-all. Right. I do my own social media. I do all my own networking with other writers, all my networking with bookstore owners. Like like you said, you have to be willing to do it all. And I know some people that are like, well, I'm going to see if, I can get a traditional publishing contract. I'm like, that's fine, but you're still going to have to do all this stuff by yourself.
Right. Yeah. I think a lot of people don't. I think a lot of times, now people are getting to the point of like respecting entrepreneurship. I feel like people used to always be like, just get a job. But like, I feel like a lot of people do not look at creatives as creative entrepreneurs. Yeah. Like it's truly having and running a small business. Yeah. Like you have to look at your break-even point. You have to look at how are you bringing in revenue. You have to look at how you're using time, and is that an accurate ROI? Like, you have to do all of these things. Like, you are a small business. And I think that some people, like, they don't look at it like that. And then they're like, man, why isn't my business getting up? And like, there's a lot of small businesses that don't, but you got to learn everything that you can learn to get it to where you want it to go.
Yeah. And network with people, man. This podcast has been a blessing because I met the guy who was my editor through this podcast. I've met people who have taught me all about how to promote yourself. Like, half of these signs up here, the ones that aren't concert posters, were all ones that I made myself on Canva, went to Staples and was like, hey, can you laminate these? And then put them up in the stores that sell my books, go out and meet people, be like, can I sell my book in your store?
Yeah.
Negotiate how much they're going to take, how much I'm going to take. It's a whole thing.
It is very much a whole thing.
And it all starts with networking. Those people that are just like terribly introverted and they're like, well, I don't know about going up to somebody. What if I ask them and they say no? Or if I ask them to show me something and they tell me to go fuck myself, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. But also it's like, I can relate to that because I am somebody who is a hyper introvert. Like, I play an extrovert for a living, and a lot of people think that I'm an extroverted person because they've seen me perform. But I am like a introvert.
Or even just watch other people perform. Like when we saw Foster Autopilot over at GR Noir, shout out to GR Noir, another person who's been on the podcast. Well, one half of the ownership. He's sitting there doing his thing, and he's talking about, oh man, what was he talking about? Something about like how wealthy and division were named and placed there intentionally, and you're like, talk about it.
Yeah. It's like in those spaces, like, I feel like I can come off my shell a little bit because I still don't gotta like have and hold a conversation. But I mean, to the point that you made, is like, even as an introvert, you have to then decide to step out of your shell. Like, you have to do these things that are uncomfortable or that you might not do or feel comfortable doing if you're going to get to where you want to go. What would you say is something that you've learned, which is like, was an uncomfortable experience to learn, but is something that made you the creative in person that you are today?
Like, in terms of things we've been talking about, or like, you mean like life experiences?
Life experiences. Because it all trickles in.
Definitely when I was younger, I had a little bit of trauma that turned me into kind of like a hyper vigilant, like, I hate the word social justice warrior, but kind of that, like, so I was always looking out for people. If somebody was like, on the bus, hey, get off this seat, I want to sit here, I'd be like, hey, he was already there, find a different seat. And I got punched in the face for that. You know what I mean? So I don't know, man, just, I guess I've always been kind of stemming probably from some abuse, some just kind of like hyper vigilant, and always looking out like, hey, that's not right, somebody should say something, nobody else is going to say something, fine, I'll say it. And I think that comes through in my writing too, because now now I write fiction and I put my characters through absolute hell. So I don't know, man, I don't know. I got to think about that and see if I can come up with a better answer for you. But
I mean, I don't think you got to come up with a better answer. I think that's honest. Yeah.
But I wasn't ready to be asked questions. So I had to stop and think like, oh, okay, hold on a second.
Wait a minute.
But yeah, man, I used to be a lot more introverted, but I think my parents were kind of like, you have to learn how to talk to people. So I'd be like, hey, can I get some ice cream, at the store? And they'd be like, here's the money. Go tell the man what you want and hand him the money. I was like, But like, just by my parents kind of like breaking down those social walls early, it helped me become more of a person who's like, hey, you're really good at this. How do you do that? And, I ask everybody that I meet, hey, what's something I can do to improve myself? When I was a teacher, when I was student teaching, I used to ask the the custodial staff. I'm like, hey, what are your tips for interacting with these kids? And they're like, you're asking me? I'm like, yeah. You know what I mean? So quite literally now, it's just, I went from being very much introverted to, oh, everybody's got something that I don't have, that I want, like as a personality piece, I mean.
Yeah.
So, and that's probably why I started the podcast too, just because I love talking to people and being like, what do you know that I don't know, and how can I take from your experiences and things that you know and add that to make a more complete me.
I love that.
Yeah. Before you go, would you like to read a poem?
Oh shoot!
I mean, I know they say don't give the milk away for free, but
so man, recently, so there's a lot of organizations that I feel like I gave a lot of flack to when I was in Grand Rapids, and I feel like some of it was justified, but some of it I feel like I also could have probably taken more personal responsibility or like understood and took time to learn more about different organizations or city areas and how they function or what they do. But there is an arm of the Grand Rapids government that is like the Office for Public Accountability, the OPA. And I used to get so mad at these people because whenever, somebody would be murdered by the police or a young child would have a gun pulled on them, they're always
talking about. That was a student of mine too.
Yep.
And actually the nephew of somebody else that was on the podcast.
Yeah. Like when something like that happens, they're the people that always end up front facing. So it's like, all right, Office of Public Accountability, what are you going to do? And then it's like, what can you say in that situation? You can't say anything. Like, number one, you're not the person that did it. Number two, you have no control over the police, right?
Yeah.
You literally can't do anything. So they're like this like sacrificial lamb. And so I always was just like, they're trash. Boo.
When in reality, maybe they were a little bit more bureaucratically handcuffed than.
Yeah, or like
because they can't come out and be like, yeah, the police were wrong for that. You know what I mean? They can't.
Right.
They just
right.
can't.
Legally they can't. Right?
Yeah.
Or they might get sued or lose their job.
Yeah.
Or I go, oh, that's defamation, and it's like, wait, what? Like, but it's right. I believe in that. And they're like, until it's legally proven, that's defamation. But I say all that to say, man, shout out to the Office of Public Accountability because they did the huge expungement fair. And I didn't know that's something that they did. I'd never been to an expungement fair. But when I went to this expungement fair, there's probably realistically 300 to 500 people that were at this event. And because of how they had it organized, it flew by in a matter of a few hours, which 300 to 500 people getting expunged, sitting down with lawyers, filling out all the paperwork. They sent in all the paperwork. They took care of it being sent to the Attorney General. They took care of it being sent to the courts. They reached back out to you to let you know, hey, this is the day that you have court. Like they did everything for you. And I got my criminal history expunged, which was huge. And I've
had something expunged too. It's nice to have it gone.
Yeah, but also to have like, if I wouldn't have went through that process, I was looking into expungements and lawyers for like $1,200, or $2,000. And it's like, I almost got to the point of where I was like, man, I guess I have to like save up and pay that. But here they are, they did that for free. And also like, technically you could do it by yourself, but also like, that's a lot of learning. And that is not an accessible system. Yeah. So I wrote this piece about my criminal history. It's called Rubik's Cube Shining. My criminal history is a Rubik's Cube that hangs Jesus piece on my neck. Remnants of Cuban links in my ears. Diamond and star-studded dreams that sit adjacent to my throat. I doubt I'll ever complete it. But as a fellow unfinished puzzle, I'm not ashamed of the stories that it tells. I find myself focusing on the blue and white. I think it's funny how my PTSD shimmers brighter when the light hits it. It starts to sing like a guilty virgin. at a wild part in society where it's like it's very easy for us to, search for reasons to condemn people. But like, for example, I always kind of thought, and this is a weird thing to say out loud, I kind of always thought like panic attacks were like make believe.
Yeah,
like I was
until
like,
you have one, right?
Until you have one. And then it's like, I'm calling 911 because I'm like, I'm dying. I'm having a heart attack. Like, you need to send an ambulance. I'm dying.
Yeah.
Right? And then I'm like, oh no, that's different. that's a real thing, right? So it's like you can hear people, you can try to like sympathize with it. Of like, oh, I had a panic attack, I had a bad day, and if you never had one, you're like, oh man, that sounds bad. I'm sorry about that. But if you had a panic attack, you're like, yeah, no, that'll mess the day up. And I think the same thing when it comes to PTSD. The same thing is when it comes to traumas and triggers. Like, I feel like we have gotten to the point of where we have a language for things like triggers. And some people, minimize people's experiences and are like, oh, a trigger or whatever. But like, for example, when I hear the word cancer, I can cry off of just saying the word cancer, right?
Yeah. Watching somebody have cancer is crazy. Like, I remember my friend's dad passed away from cancer, and from the time he got diagnosed to the time he died was like 8 months, but he was like normal looking to anybody that would have seen him when he got diagnosed. And by the end of it, man, he was like a skeleton with skin. And my friend said it, and it was such a weird phrasing, but he's like, I don't know how else to say it. I have a whole new respect for cancer after watching somebody die from it.
It's violent. It's violent. It's violent. But to that being said, it's like, I can understand why it's like, there are different triggers, from everything from sexual assault to words like cancer to abuse to mental health issues. Like, depending on your personal experience and what you went through, even hearing a word, much less seeing something or being reminded of it, can shut you down.
Yeah.
And I feel like we need to do a better job of that as people, like really taking into account or being aware and empathizing with people's experiences, because we don't do that.
Yeah, no, we really, the last time I was having kind of a not emotional, but a physiological response to something that had triggered me emotionally. I tried to tell somebody, I was like, I'm sorry, man, I might have PTSD or something like it. And so right now I look like this, but I'm not, that's not actually how I'm thinking inside. And they just were kind of like didn't want to look at me, didn't want to talk about it. We're just waiting for me to say the next thing so they could like, okay, I'm not talking about that anymore.
It's like, dang, man.
And if somebody would just be like, sorry, dude, that looks like it sucks, I'd be like, it does, you know what I mean? And that probably would have started bringing me back out of it again. But when they just like go button lipped and don't look at you, it's kind of like, fuck you, man, treat me like a person still.
Right, yeah. Or can I support you? Do we need to leave this situation? Like, do you want me to get a cup of water? Do you want to step outside? Yeah. Like, in anything. Yeah.
Like, would you like me to leave you alone right now? Or do you want me to be here? Like,
I'm going to come back in 15 minutes, see how you are. Right?
Yeah.
Anything.
Yeah. But a lot of people get real uncomfortable with other people's trauma and their responses to it, which is why I'm glad, tying it back in, that you've got, with all the experiences that you've had from, rough childhoods and rough patches in adulthood. I'm glad that people are shining a light on that, you specifically. I'm glad that you're shining a light on that. And hopefully, somebody sees that book before they decide to take their own life, or reads your book while they're in the middle of having their own, stress response and go, okay, God, it's not just me, at least.
Yeah. Or maybe somebody who's rough around the edges and who isn't proud of where they're at in life reads it and feels like they actually have time to get better.
Yeah. Because I've noticed that as a theme with some of the things that you've written about and that you've talked about, is just kind of this idea of like, I'm not who I'm meant to be yet, but I'm trying to get there. One catastrophe at a time, one day at a time, one project at a time. You know what I mean? Like,
This is great, man. Thank you very much for lending your platform. Thank you for talking. Thank you for also being vulnerable with me. The book comes out into the real world October 8th. Pre-orders are available until then. If you go to Diagram, New Michigan Press, or even if you just go to my website, MarcelFablePrice.com, you can pre-order the book there. But yeah, if you're listening, please follow me on social media. If you want to reach out, vent, talk, you can do that. But yeah, I hope if you're hearing this, you read the book and you dive in and let me know what you think about it.
Hell yeah. There's a weird guy standing at the door, Dad.
Yeah. And that meme of like when dogs are barking and then you yell at them, "Shut up!" And then, like the dog's like, "I'm just trying to help you. I'm trying to save your life." And you're like, "Shut up."
Dude, that never works. I have people that I'll hear their dogs barking and they're just like, "Hi, hi, hi!" Like, you're making it worse, dude.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, man. Well, hey, it was good seeing you. Good talking to you. Thank you for being patient with me while I was handling my technical and stomach difficulties.
The pleasure's all mine, man. I look forward to talking to you soon, and hopefully I'll connect with you next time I'm in Grand Rapids.
Hell yeah. Please do. All right, everybody. That was Marcel. Thank you, Marcel. Talk to you soon, man. How do I end the recording? Okay, I'm gonna hit end recording, and if it hangs up abruptly when I do that, All right, everybody, that was Marcel Fable Price, author of the new book of poetry coming out October 8th, New American Monarch. Pre-order link is available, or if you don't hear this till after then, the order link is available in the show notes. Thank you, everybody. See you next time. Mwah.